and welcome to Lesson 7 of No Stress Distress Inks. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create a resist background, just like I showed you in Lesson 6, but this one's going to be a little bit more involved and involve distress ink on both of the layers, both underneath and on top of the embossing. So let's get started. I have all 6 colors of the green distress ink out here. I have Shabby Shutters, Bundled Sage, and Crushed Olive. And then Peeled Paint, Pine Needles, and Forest Moss. And the plan right now is to use the lighter colors so that they're under the embossing and show through, and the darker colors for above them. And since all the greens are a little bit different, we're going to do it kind of blotchy, and we'll just kind of see how it turns out. The bottom layer doesn't need to be very blended because you're not going to end up seeing very much of the surface area of this layer. You will see the color shining through with the embossing powder, but other than that, you don't need to worry about blending it too much. Okay, so I've added the Shabby Shutters. Now I'm going to go in with my Bundled Sage and just add some color. Okay, I've added the Bundled Sage and now some Crushed Olive. And I'm just kind of going around in a triangle pattern and filling in the areas that aren't covered with ink yet. So as you can see, I have my background, and I have it looks like all of the white is covered up. Now, here's kind of the tricky part. If I was to stamp and emboss right now, some of the embossing powder would stick to this ink because it's still, even though it feels dry to the touch, it's still actually wet. It will still come off on your fingers. And if you wanted to emboss with distress ink, you could, as long as you were working really quickly. Otherwise, it's now kind of in this weird halfway state where it's half dry. So what we need to do first, before we emboss it, is to dry this piece of paper, actually, so that none of the embossing powder will stick where it's not supposed to. So I'm just going to turn on my heat gun and heat this through until it feels a little bit more dry. Sometimes it takes a while. It depends on how long it takes your heat gun to heat up. So I'm just going to do this for probably about a minute. And yeah, just go by feel on this one. Okay, so I've dried my piece, and it now feels just as dry as the back side of the paper. And you can tell that way, when you feel a damp piece of paper, it kind of catches your finger, but this is very smooth, so it should be good to go. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ink up this background stamp from Hero Arts. It's called CG241 Flower Pattern, and I like this one because it has pretty bold lines, but a little bit of detail, and that'll work well for this technique, since it's not really about the pattern of the background showing through, it's about the color and the color contrast. Now I'm just going to put it down and then transfer that Versamark ink onto it. Okay, and it looks like we got a good impression, so just going to move that stamp off to the side so I can clean it later. And now it's time to add my clear embossing powder. Okay, and now this is a very important step with this technique. Make sure that you tap off the excess powder, because there probably will be some that like static clings to the background. And you can tap it a little bit harder when you're not over your work surface. Okay, so it looks like I have embossing powder only where I want it. And so that means that we are good to go And I'm just going to emboss this now. So my image is embossed and everything looks like it came out just perfectly. I just love this pattern that it's the stamps. So now we're just going to start the second part of this technique, which is going back with the darker colors and really letting the image show up and shine. So I'm starting out with the peel paint, and then I think the majority of this will be covered in peeled paint. It just depends on how it's looking. But I'm definitely going to use the other two colors as well. But you can already see it's already starting to show up. So I'll just speed this part up so you can watch me reveal the image. Okay, I'm just going to add a little bit more to darken up the middle. And I really like how this forest moss color worked on this. It's almost like a brownish green, as you can see from the side, but it looks really good with all these other greens. So this is my finished image, and now I'm just going to grab a tissue and rub over it to remove the excess ink. And you can see I removed quite a bit of ink, so it's really good to rub over the image and get that all straight away. So this is the finished image that is ready to go on my card. And yeah, it's just basically one more step from last week's tutorial. Just the main thing is to remember to dry it. And you can do any technique you want in the background. I love doing things like this where you have like polka dots embossed on it, and then the front is a completely different color than the back. So you could do blue, you could do yellow in the back, and then do a purple in the front. And as long as the color kind of overlaps the other color in the non-embossed areas, it'll look great every time. So, thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions about this video or any of my other videos, please feel free to leave a comment, or either over on YouTube or over on my blog. And here's the finished card. And here's a close-up. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you again next time for another episode of No Stress Distress Inks.